Okay.
And 3, 2, 1.
Boom. All right. So this is the Gen Pop TV podcast. We're going to be talking about different aspects of fitness, longevity, lifespan, training through your lifespan. Who better to start off the podcast with the first episode than Richard Flaum, my client, 5-time state powerlifting record holder, spearfisher, real estate developer, all-around badass, strongman, all that stuff. Mascot of different athletic clubs. Welcome.
Thank you.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sawyer Scott. I'm a personal trainer, fitness coach, and Army veteran. So Richard, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Richard Flaum. Within the past 2 weeks, I just turned 80 years old, and my life is, so I've got a long life story to tell.
We got the time for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, my life was fairly ordinary. I went through.
Keep going.
Yeah, I went through the normal stages. I went to school, had my friends, played kids' sports. When I was very young, I got interested in stuff that, the average kid wasn't interested in. Used to watch a TV program called Sea Hunt, and they were like a group of guys. We would get together when I was like 12 years old. And I had already been adventurous when I was 12, 13. I had another group of friends. We were living in South Florida, and we formed a junior herpetologist club, and we would go out and capture critters, snakes, frogs, and even poisonous snakes. And we actually went to a dentist, my dentist that I knew, and we would get the white coats so that when we took the venom out of the snakes, we looked like we were professional, except that we were 12.
Yeah.
And, then I watched this program, Sea Hunt, and we were all talking about how we would go out to California and dive the kelp beds. But we lived in Miami, so had a paper route, saved up some money, bought fins, mask, and snorkel, made a Hawaiian sling out of bamboo and surgical rubber, and fabricated some spears out of some torsion rods you could get from the junkyard that held up the trunk on Chrysler vehicles. We would cut off the ends and sharpen them and put a barb in them.
This is very DIY.
Yeah. So, then got a big inner tube, a truck inner tube, blew it up, put a net in the middle, and hauled that all down to the beach on the bus with a cork in the spear because they wouldn't let you on the bus if the spear was out, and would swim off the beach in Hollywood, Florida, and spearfish and take lobster and do it all in fairly shallow water, 10, 12 feet, sort of like a big swimming pool, but always adventurous. And as I got better at diving, started becoming very proficient at shooting fish, went from Hawaiian sling to banded guns, and got so good at it that when I was in my teens, older guys that had big boats would invite me to come on board and go over to Bimini because I could shoot all the fish, so I would get the free trip to Bimini.
You're a good hang.
Yeah, I would get the free trip to Bimini, and then they give me like 10 pounds of fillets.
Oh yeah.
And
it's a good trade.
And a dozen or so lobster tails, and I'd come home with them, even though I shot like 3/4 of the fish that were on the boat. And you know, that stage of my life, the diving part, stayed with me all the way into my early 30s. And we got our own boat. I actually competed in spearfishing tournaments. Got to the point where I could free dive 100 feet holding my breath. And missed going to the world tournament by one place. I placed third in marathon in a big tournament, a U.S. tournament, and they only took the first two. So close but no cigar, but did very well at that. Always enjoyed it, and stayed with diving until I moved out of Florida in my 30s. I moved to Chicago, and at that point, Lake Michigan didn't entice me. But as a supplement to all of that, I took up running at an early age so that I could build up a little bit more wind power.
Because you were an asthmatic.
Well, I was an asthmatic kid to begin with.
Yeah.
And then I started lifting weights, and you know, lifted heavy weights, but never had a trainer, never did anything that was like organized. I put it together, had a bunch of buddies who'd go lift, and nobody was looking to see if you bench pressed and brought the weight all the way down to your chest, you know, or
not competition standard.
Yeah, and deadlifts were something out of the question, and things like squats never excited me. But, you know, all around we would put together stuff, and 3 days a week go in and hit stuff heavy, but mostly it was about 4, 5, 6 different exercises that covered most of the body. And, you know, that workout carried me all the way pretty much, you know, through my life. When I was, I went to junior college at Miami-Dade Junior College, and when I hit 21, I applied to the Miami Police Department, and I joined the Miami Police Department in graduated in 1967 out of the academy, and within 3 years I had attained the rank of sergeant, and the Miami Police Department started the first SWAT team in the Southeast. We were trained through the FBI Academy in Quantico, their people, and learned how to rappel off of buildings and out of helicopters and how to handle explosives and all the general good stuff down there. But as a sergeant, I was in charge of not only my own SWAT team, but I was also the physical trainer for SWAT. So we had a bunch of municipalities that would come to our academy to qualify their people for their SWAT teams. And I was the hated person that would make them run a mile with full pack in the Florida sun. So
I'm glad I wasn't there.
Yeah, I spent 11 years on the police department, and you know, got a chance to look around the world, and decided that I would then go into my own business, leave the police department. So I opened a bar in Fort Lauderdale. That was I had other endeavors while I was on the police department, but you were limited as to what you could do because you were a policeman, you know, so there were restrictions. And when I opened the bar, I then found out that you couldn't have a liquor license or a beer and wine license and still be a policeman. So.
Is that still the case?
Huh?
I didn't know that.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's weird.
But it was then.
Okay.
And so I left the police department. I ran the bar for I don't know, um, 2 years, and then in 1978, and of course, you know, there were the good times in Miami. The whole disco thing came in, got involved in the dancing side of that, you know. Really enjoyed it. It was a good workout, you know. And in '78, I sold the bar and went up and joined my brother in Chicago and got into business with him. And he had a beanbag chair business, and beanbags started to slide, and we went into the foam furniture business of, you know, lifestyle stuff, and built quite a business out of that. Wound up selling that and moving on, and then restarted another one on my own, and sold that out. And
Throughout this time, were you
yeah,
still
yeah,
doing your disco and
in
lifting?
in the interim of all of that, while I was a policeman, I think I was married twice, had a daughter, and then moved to Chicago. I had already been divorced, but all the time always continuing to work out and do stuff. And when I got to Chicago, I had always done a lot of running when I was on the police department, and they had the Chicago lakefront. And so I started running there and ran my first marathon when I was 35 years old, and completed that. And then got a little bit away from, well, I would running distance, but I wasn't doing any more marathons, and then got into, met a guy that was doing ultra marathons, and we used to run together. And just before I left Chicago, I ran a half marathon in some really good time, like an hour and 27 minutes. And then when I left Chicago and moved to Detroit, because I had married a girl that was from Detroit while I was in Chicago, and had 2 sons with her. And so I ran the Detroit Marathon and did that in 3 hours and 15 minutes at 40 years old. And that was, you know, sort of my last marathon. But the way my life evolved was I would create these challenges for myself, you know, like spearfishing, or how deep could I dive? You know, how many minutes could I stay down? How many fish could I get? I always strive to try to be the best around. It was, even though things weren't competitive, I was always competitive. I like to be on top of the whole game. And the same thing with running. You know, I had no idea that I could run 26 miles and change, but I set my mind to it and I was able to do it. Getting ready for my second marathon, I had remembered everything I had done like 5 years before in the first marathon. And I hooked up with this guy that was running ultras. And what I used to do for volume coming into the event is I would go out and run 8 miles. This fellow lived right off of Lakeshore Drive. So I would run from my place to his place and leave a pair of shoes, like softer over distance shoes. And then I put on my speed work shoes and would go out and run 8 miles as fast as I could, 4 miles out, 4 miles back. I'd hit his lobby. The doorman would give him a call. I'd switch shoes and he would come down and we'd run together, and he would pace me, and we would run up the lake as far as I could run, and then when I was about to collapse, I would just look at him and say, "See ya," and I carried a $20 bill and would run out and grab a cab and go back home. Because at that point, I wasn't able to run anymore. And, you know.
Did you leave by yourself?
Huh?
You left by yourself?
I left him. I just said, I'm done.
Because he would have pushed you to go further?
Well, at that point, he had already pushed me to go further.
Yeah.
You know, we were already probably at pace 12 to 14 miles into the run.
Yeah.
And you know, I hit the wall because the pace we set was pretty heavy. You know, we were down under 7 minutes on his part of the run.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was, but you know, never give up. I mean, when I stopped and said goodbye, the legs were gone.
Yeah.
You know? So.
I mean, I know you. You're not gonna stop for any reason.
Part of my thing.
Sure.
So then fast forward, I mean, there's some other exciting stuff. Other people that I did business with that were
You ended
sort
up
of celebrities.
You ended up at Hilton Head playing a lot of tennis.
Well, that was prior to that. I had divorced my third wife, where I had the 2 boys, and was still living in Detroit.
He's single, by the way, ladies.
And I was, living downtown at a place called Riverfront, and you know, I was doing real estate. I was a vice president at Colliers International. I had a broker's license, and I headed up the industrial division there. And then later moved on into the retail division and picked up, I had a good business, bunch of clients. And at the apartment that I was living at, we would run up the Detroit River in the morning. And then I took up swimming again because I had swam, you know, a lot. I met a guy at the apartment. He would go out and run with me, and then we would swim, and he was a doctor at the emergency room in Detroit, and was a better swimmer than I was. He made it all the way through college, qualified for the Olympics, you know. The typical swimmer, you know, 6'3" with big hands and feet.
Sure.
But I could outrun him, so we had this mutual endeavor. And I was out for a run, a long run with him, and I said, God, I keep getting this shortness of breath. And he said to me, well, why don't you, go get to your doctor and, you know, have a physical exam. I think maybe you have a heart problem. And I said, I don't have a heart problem, you know. I mean, he says, well, how would you know?
Let me make sure it's still recording. Yeah, we're still good. All right. Carry on.
I said, he said, how would you know? And I said, well, I guess I wouldn't. He says, well, I'll tell you what, you go get checked up, or I'll take you over to Detroit Receiving Hospital where I'm working, and you're not going to like that. We'll do that there. Anyway, I went to a friend of mine, the doctor, and she gave me the EKG and came out, and she said to me, you know, your heart's really fine and strong, but I feel, when I did the physical exam, I feel there's some guarding in your abdominal area. I'd like you to let me take an x-ray and see what I got. And she came out. We were really, really good friends. Her husband and I worked together, and you know, socially we were friends. She came out with tears in her eyes, and she went, your spleen is about 6 pounds. That's why you're not able to breathe real well, and you've got cancer. And you know, that was sort of a downhill road. I went just to a general hospital, realized quickly they had no idea what they were doing with cancer. wound up at the University of Michigan in their cancer program. Found out that I had something called mantle cell lymphoma that's usually diagnosed in stage 4, which I was in, and life expectancy is about 5 to 7 years tops, and that even exists today. So I pushed my way. The first doctor said to me, this was like in October, November, he said, you need to start chemotherapy right away. And I said, well, what are my options? And he said, there are no options. If you don't do chemo, then you have no chance whatsoever. And I said, well, there got to be options. I mean, I have accountants, I have lawyers. I asked him what my options are. There's more than one way to handle things. And he said, no options. And I said, well, you're fired. He says, well, you can't fire me. I said, well, you can't touch me. And then I went, I had met the administrator for the head of the hematology oncology department. And he was like the top dog in cancer. He was, had just written a big article for the medical journal, and he was on tour giving speeches, to different medical schools and students. And I walked into her and I said, I would like him to handle my case. And she said, he's so busy now, he's not taking on any new patients. And I said, well, I'm the exemplary patient and he's the exemplary doctor. Just make an appointment for me. Give me 5 minutes with him. And I convinced him to take my case. There was no actual treatment for mantle cell lymphoma at the time. They treated it the same way as non-Hodgkin's. He ran a bunch of tests on me. He said, you're in really great physical condition except for this problem. He said, so what I'm going to do is give you CHOP chemotherapy, which is what we have for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Instead of 6 courses, I want to give you 8, and I want to double each course. I want to give you twice as much as we would normally give somebody. He says, but I think your system can take it. And he said, the only thing is that we're going to give you, one of the drugs was adriamycin, and he said, it could soften your heart. And if that happens, your athletic side is gone, But he said, your heart looks pretty strong, the heart muscle is strong. He said, I'd like to take the shot. So we took the shot. And I went into remission for 8 years, which was unheard of. And the cancer came back in 8 years. They didn't have any treatment for it other than what he had given me. And that meant that whatever cancer cells had come back were immune to that. So he said there was a doctor out in Seattle that had removed somebody's spleen that had all the cancer cells in it, and it had given the guy some remission. So I said, okay, let's do it. Now this was like in late October, and my son and my new wife, I had a fourth wife, we were supposed to go for spring, winter break, out to Arizona, had reservations made and everything. And I figured that they would do this operation after we got back. Well, they didn't believe that I really had mantle cell because they had no hard tissue. Everything had been through blood work. So they wanted that spleen. So the first part of November, they moved me ahead of everybody, and I was scheduled to have my spleen out. So took my spleen out, put 21 staples in me. Was not the ideal patient. Was supposed to lay in bed and do bed rest.
That's not who you are.
My wife came and visited me, and I said, I can't stand the hospital food. Can we get down to the cafeteria? And she snuck me some clothes, and I dressed up and sort of waddled down to the cafeteria. So, you know, my normal self, just, you know, doing what I felt was best for me. Was supposed to be in the hospital for about a week, got out in about 3 days. And then I asked the doctor, you know, he said, you know, walk, but take it easy, you know, that way you keep everything moving, don't stay in bed, you know. I said, well, you know, I've got an elliptical in my basement. I had sort of a gym set up down there. I said, how about if I use the elliptical? And he said, okay, you just don't overdo it. Well, got back in pretty good shape, and my son came out for winter break, and we went to Arizona, and we were in Phoenix. And the second day we were there, my son said to me, I want to try to climb Camelback Mountain. He was like 18 years old at the time. He said, can you drive me over there, Dad?
This is Zach?
This is Zach,
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. And as I was going out the door, Kendall, this was my wife, she said, don't get any foolish ideas. And I said, of course not.
Never.
Well, I got there and parked, and I watched Zach walk into the mountain by himself, and I went, the heck with this. I got out. I still had the staples in my belly. And we climbed Camelback Mountain. And then to my chagrin, I found that you actually had to go back down, which was somewhat harder than climbing.
Sure.
And when I got back, of course, I had a very unhappy spouse, but I had done something great with my kid, you know, that I would have missed doing if I had just let it go by the wayside. And that really has never changed my lifestyle. You know, I'm always sort of out there, you know.
Well, you keep getting away with it, so good job.
You know. So, you know, then moving on, went through, when I had my spleen out, I went through another 8-year remission. I came out of that. They tried a new protocol on me. It didn't work, and it actually turned the cancer blastoid, or what they call very aggressive. It turned into like a large B-cell lymphoma. And so I called my doc in Michigan, and he said, I got nothing. All of the clinical trials are going to MD Anderson now. You know, they're the big dog. He said, but I got a buddy there. Would you be willing? At this time, I was living on Hilton Head Island. I was living the dream. I had a little manufacturing business off the island, and I was living right across from the water in a really nice spot. And I went, yeah, I said I would go. Now, at the time, I had my fourth wife, who was quite a bit younger than me. She was going through some real emotional problems over my cancer. And I noticed that she was going almost into clinical depression. And we had a long conversation. I said, you know, this is going to kill you before it kills me. You really have to get out of this and leave. And it broke my heart because, you know, I really cared for her, and we're still really good friends.
Yeah, you guys are still amicable.
So I had to get an appointment with this doctor at MD Anderson. It took a couple of months. They had always been used to the cancer that I had being what they call indolent or very slow growing. Well, this thing was moving quickly. So I got there and I went in and had the first exams, and I was going back to the hotel and went to cross the street, and my feet didn't work. I managed to get across, but I couldn't run. And I playing a lot of tennis up to like a month before that, at a pretty high level. And I didn't quite understand that. And then they told me that they wanted to take some sort of a biopsy, and they couldn't do that for about 4 days. And I said, the heck with it, and flew back to Hilton Head. And I remember I went to a yoga class, and I got down on the mat, and I couldn't get up. And that's the first time in my life that my physicality totally failed me. I mean, I was beside myself. And got back to, then I got a call the next day, and they had the results of some tests, and the doctor said, you need to get back here like immediately, because otherwise you're gonna die. So I remember I went to the airport with my brother was with me, and I was sort of tottering, and he had wandered off somewhere, and I went to plug my phone into the wall in the airport because the plane was slightly delayed, and fell down, and I was like a turtle on its back. I couldn't get up, and a couple of people came and helped me get up, and I'm just like, my God, I'm used to being the top dog,
Sure.
and now I got nothing. So I got back to MD Anderson, and they started, I went through one clinical trial, and that killed 75% of my right kidney when they finally took me off of it. And then I was trying to qualify for a second one, but during that period of time I had lost complete mobility, neuropathy. I had neuropathy in my arms and legs and was in a wheelchair. And so the doctor said, you can't qualify for the next clinical trial unless you can walk. And he said, I don't see that happening. And I grabbed the neurologist that had been working with me, and I said, I mean, I was bold about it. I said, when the hell can I saw him in the cafeteria, and I whipped my wheelchair over there, and I went, well, when can I get back to playing tennis? And he says, well, how about let's talk about walking. And he said, maybe if you survive the cancer, maybe in 2 years of extensive physical therapy, we'll get you up and walking, but you'll never walk without a cane. And I went, I don't accept that. So I got back to the apartment. They had a small gym there, and I said to my son Zach had come into town, and I said, Zach, wheel me down to the gym to the recumbent bike and help me into it. And I started that day on the recumbent bike. I was able to pedal very slowly for about a minute and a half. And after 3 weeks, I was on the bike for over a half an hour. And I left the wheelchair and got in a walker. And 2 weeks after that, I handed Zach the walker, and I said, let me try to walk down. And I had an appointment with the neurologist the next week, and he came in, and they had me set up, they put like needles in your legs to see if you've got any sensory, you know. And of course my legs are kicking all over the place. And he walked in and said, hold up on that. He said, I heard you walked in here. And I said, I did. And he said, show me. So he said, walk to the wall. So I walked to the wall and did my version of the moonwalk back. So, how's that? So then
You really did say, watch me. Or I can't accept that.
Yeah. So he came back and he looked at me. And when I got back, he said, whatever happened right in front of my eyes here is medically impossible. He said, so here's my card. So if you ever want to have a cup of coffee, call me. But what I'm seeing is something I've never seen before. And he said, you got no feeling in your legs. I mean, I don't know how you managed to get your nervous system back to what it did, but you know, somebody's got to be looking over you, you know, on this one. So I wound up going through the next clinical trial, and that put my cancer in full and complete remission. So I was the first mantle cell patient, not only had lived longer than any other mantle cell patient, but I was the first one after it turned blastoid to go into full and complete remission. So they moved me up and put me in for a stem cell transplant. And in 2012, January 2013, I had a stem cell transplant, allogenic. My brother matched, so I got his stem cells. And, you know, it took me a while, but then I went into full recovery, but I went into the same mode. When I was in the hospital with the stem cell, I actually got to the point where I was walking 9 miles a day in a loop. And then I got one of the PT guys. They had a room with weights, light weights, and a spinning bike and, you know, some other stuff in the treadmill. And I asked him if he would give me the code, because you were supposed to only go there with a PT guy. But I was getting admonished because I had a central line to me and bags of stuff that were being pumped in, and the nurse caught me running in the back, like the North 90 by the elevators, and said, do you realize what will happen if that pump falls and pulls that out? You'll bleed out before we have a chance to save you. And she said, I'm going to ground you. And I said, no. And so I got the PT guy to give me the code. So then I would just sneak into that room and get on the bike, and, you know, and the only thing in my life that was a constant that I found is that if I physically went after something, that gave me the ability to survive and calm and get better at it. And you know, that's the way I chased my health. It's the only way I knew how to do that. So so then, you know, I decided I didn't want to get too far away from Houston, so as I got rid of everything on Hilton Head and moved to Houston, and have been here ever since.
Less scenic.
Huh?
Less scenic.
Yeah, less scenic, a little hotter.
A little bit.
And no ocean real close,
Yep.
you know. But, you know, it had the best medical center in the world. And so I went back and took up some tennis, joined, you know, a health club where they had indoor tennis courts and stuff, and started back playing tennis again, and then began lifting my weights again. And then tore up, was playing singles tennis with guys in their late 30s, early 40s in a league that they had there. And I was 67 and recovering from cancer. So moving on a singles court, I wound up tearing a meniscus in my left knee, and said, well, you know, Hilton Head had clay courts. We used to play a lot of doubles. That wasn't the case here. So, you know, continued at that health club, which was big. You know, it had all the stuff. But, you know, they had some trainers, but nobody that I felt confident in, and I felt like I had my thing, and I had a couple of guys I worked out with all the time. But I missed the tennis, and then pickleball came along, and so I felt that, you know, God gave me my legs back, so I might as well use them, and played that for a while. And
Let me double check the camera, make sure it's still rolling. Yeah, we're still good. Yeah, everything's good. Yeah, carry on.
And I was lifting fairly heavy weight, but I was working out with guys that were half my age and larger than I was. And but I was also taking a spinning class, and you know, doing the whole thing. And I was in a spinning class about a year and a half ago. More than that, it was like 2.5 years ago. And the guy that was running the spinning class came up to me. I was wearing a heart monitor. And he said to me, "How are you feeling?" And I looked at him and I go, "Why are you bothering me?" You know, I'm a half hour into an hour class, sweat pouring off of me, and you're asking me how I'm feeling. And he goes, well, have you looked up at the screen? And I said, "No, Bill." And I looked up, and I was redlined. My heart rate was up to like 185, and it was just hanging there. And he said, "It's been that way." And you know, he says, "I want you to slow down and get off." I listened to him, and even when I finally reached, you know, level, the heart stayed up for close to 10 minutes. And I wound up going into a doctor and found out that I had AFib, and went back and had, through that, recovers 2 ablations, and then they did what they call a cardioversion, where they use paddles on you, see if they can change the heart rate, because the 2 ablations didn't work. And I was on medication that made me feel like crap, and you know, it was affecting my you know, my ability to do what I enjoyed, you know, working out, playing pickleball, and doing it. So the doctor, I was very impressed with him. This Dr. Valderrabano, who's over at Houston Methodist, and he said, "I can do one, if you're up to it," he said, "I can do one more ablation." He said, "There'll be no more paths that I haven't covered, so we should get rid of the AFib." So I said, "Have at it." And he did it, and for the next 30 days, I had no AFib. I was off the medication. I came back 30 days later for my 30-day checkup, and he said to me, he looked at my EKG and he goes, "Are you having any trouble breathing?" And I said, "Yeah, a little bit." He says, "Well, that's because you're in congestive heart failure." I went, "Oh, great." So they did some tests. They found that because of all the prednisone that I had taken as part of the cancer protocol, it leached calcium out of my skeletal system and redeposited it,
In the heart?
the calcium, and it deposited on the heart valves. So my aortic valve was like 0 tolerance at that point. So he hooked me up with some valve guys over there, but he also said to me that your heart is beating irregularly. And so this was a guy I meet these people that are the salvation. He said, you will probably wind up with a pacemaker because after you have the valve, but they're not going to be able to put the valve in for a month and a half, because of their schedule. They can't get you into surgery. He said, I want to put the pacemaker in right now. And he said, you have what they call a left bundle branch block, and it's making your heart twist every time it beats, and it's weakening your heart muscle. If I let you go for a month and a half, it's going to affect your overall athletic ability and the lifetime of your heart. So I said, have you checked with the valve guys? And he said, check with the valve guys. I'm the expert on this stuff. He said, I'll get you in 2 days. And so he put a pacemaker in me, and then I had a valve put in, aortic valve, and that was about, that was in April of 2003 or 4, let's see, maybe 2003, because it's been, no, it was April of 2004. So now, they put the valve in me, and it was like somebody gave me a new life. The energy came back, everything was good. I came out of recovery. They put me in a room to hold me overnight to make sure that everything was good. I felt so good, I got up and put a pair of kicks on and shorts, and jumped out in the hallway, figured I'd take a walk. Charge nurse said to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking a walk. She said, you need somebody to go with you. I grabbed her by the arm. I said, let's go. So, and then came back and started working out at the club that I was at again. And August of that year that I had the valve put in, well, a little before then, I met Sawyer, and I was lifting some pretty heavy weight with a trap bar deadlift. But what intrigued me was powerlifting, and I said, I said to him, I've got 2 problems. One,
you can talk to me.
I said, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
I said to you,
yeah.
that one, I didn't know how to do a regular deadlift. I'd never done one. And I tried it, and it didn't make me feel comfortable at all. And 2, I had a big problem because I couldn't get my hands back to hold the bar and do squats. So
because you're a pacemaker, you couldn't bench
to
your chest.
And the pacemaker, they had told me that I couldn't bench.
Yeah.
But I didn't believe that. And so he said, well, let's start with what you can do. So I put it off for a couple of months, and then in August of last year.
Well, I also pitched the Olympic lifting stuff too.
Huh? Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He pitched me for Olympic lifting, and I thought about it, and I'm saying, late 70s, throwing big weight over my head probably is not a good idea. but I did consider it.
Yeah.
So the other option, which seemed to fit in better, was powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started on deadlifts, and he looked at me and shook. I had seen where there was some sort of a world record with some offshoot organization, where you didn't even have to join. You just paid to be in the meet, and then they would then you would pay to get your certificate afterwards. But the guy had lifted like 303 pounds. And I'm out here with him. Now, I was lifting a lot of weight with the trap bar, but when I went to the regular bar where you got to balance and uh, there's the whole thing. Um, I was grunting and groaning at about 175, 185, and I said to Sawyer, "You think we can get to 330? Because I want to break this world record."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Anything's possible."
You can just talk to me. You just say,
Yeah.
You told me.
You told me.
Yeah.
I could talk to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, friends. You said anything's possible, and so we moved on, and he changed the way that he showed me the absolute correct way to do it, but physically, I didn't have the flexibility, and I didn't have the muscle support system on my stabilizing muscles to do it right. But we're stuck with it, and we were making progress, and then Sawyer moved to Sigma. You did.
Mm-hmm.
And said, "Will you come join me over there? It's a lot different kind of gym.
Mm-hmm.
They specialize in powerlifting and high rocks." And Carlos Mata, who Sawyer introduced me to right away, was a highly competitive lifter. And as of this moment today, he's qualified to go to the World Tournament in Cape Town, South Africa on April 15th. On October 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's lifting in the 73 kilo category, which is one step above me. I'm lifting in 66. And he weighs about somewhere between 161 and 165 pounds. And he's pulling 620 pounds off the ground on a deadlift. And then we have a couple of young people, like Cameron, who's
close to 600.
a junior, and he's pulling 550.
Well, 572
or 570.
Best recorded. Yeah, he's going to shoot for 600 in December.
Yeah. And the bottom line is now I am surrounded and immersed in all this talent, which gives you great incentive, and it also gives you people that are doing everything right, so that what your trainer is telling you starts to make sense. You begin to see how technique becomes almost as important, as, if not more so, than actual strength. Mm-hmm. In order to lift weight that's 2.5 times your body weight, 3 times your body weight, or like in Carlos's case, almost 4 times your body weight, your technique has to be perfect. Otherwise, if that weight walks out even an inch away from your body, by the time it hits your knees, it's going to pull you over. You can't hold it. And Sawyer have been instrumental in showing me how to do that. I never thought, 330 was always a dream, and I never thought that I would hit 330. But 2.5 weeks ago, we hit 342, 155 kilos. And now we're looking at 400. And now I'm looking at nationals. In April of this year, I did my first event, and I only did the push-pull, which is bench and deadlift, because I still couldn't do the squats at that time, and set 5 state records. I hold the record now for bench press in the Master 4 and Master 5, which is the 70 and 80 category, and on the deadlift in the Master 3, 4, and 5, which is 60s, 70s, and 80s. and I'm looking forward. Sawyer's working with me to get me to an event in Stafford, Texas, on the 11th of October, and I look to break a lot more records when I get there, because the other side of it is Sawyer and Carlos, and I had one other helper that is a trainer that I've used for a long time, just on flexibility and balance. And between all of them, they have gotten me to hold the bar in the proper place so that I can do squats and do a complete power lift. And the event that I'm going to, it's not just a local event, it's a national event that they're doing in Stafford. And so they're not doing single lifts. You can't go in and just be a deadlifter or a bench presser, or do both of those. You've got to do all three lifts or you don't qualify. But by doing all three lifts, I'll qualify for nationals. And that's what we're all looking forward to. And you know, I've been sort of long-winded, but I've had a really interesting life and overcome a lot of obstacles, but with the help of my friends. You know, without somebody like you, I probably wouldn't be doing this right now. And to anybody listening, I can just tell you, you need to get yourself a good trainer, and you need to...
I'm not paying him to say this, by the way.
And you need to get to a facility that's geared for that type of work. Because just lifting, even though your bigger gyms, like Lifetime Fitness, and et cetera, I mean, they're fancy, and they got tennis, and they got this, and they got that, and, you know, and steam rooms, and all, you know, the good spa kind of stuff. They don't have the atmosphere that lets you actually get serious about what you're doing, and get serious about it and do it without getting hurt. I have to thank you, because at 138 pounds, I'm lifting 2.5 times my body weight at this point, and I haven't sustained any injuries. And that's
knock on wood.
Really important. Well, it's important. I mean,
yeah.
I guess if my physical skeleton collapses by the weight, you know, which I don't see happening, you know, I could get injured, but as long as I continue to do things right and I have the watchful eye, and, you know, it's not just Sawyer. I mean, we were beating our head against the wall. We had some of the flexibility that would go up, but I couldn't get the bar back in the right position.
On the traps?
On the traps. It was more higher on my neck, where it was painful to do it. And you can't use a pad when you're competing.
Right.
And Carlos walked by and said, "You're never going to get it back there with the bar that high." He said, "Lower it and put your arms out,"
yeah.
and bingo. Now we're doing it. So.
And that's what's good about here, is that we collaborate, and he strongly encourages collaboration between us. He really got onto us a couple weeks ago, because we, you know, we're looking the other way when somebody was teaching something wrong, and now we're helping each other. It's a good environment for that.
Yeah, and I mean, like even today, you know, I came in, I was in on my own, and Gene came over and helped me set up what we had to do, and then you came here later, even though I wasn't paying you for it, and jumped in like the big buddy, and got me through a heavy workout today.
And I've been at places where there's a lot of poaching, or a vibe of poachiness, or, you know, every person for themselves. It's a good way. It's a good atmosphere, because I share clients with people, not just for classes, but for days. You know, in the long term, I share people.
Yeah.
And there's no pressure. There's no leaderboard. There's none of that stuff.
And ever since I've been here, I mean, it's like a family affair. I mean, at the old gym I was at, you had your trainer. You might know one of the other guys because he's been there for a long time. But basically, if you're not telling these trainers that you want to hire them and have them do something specific for you, that they don't have the time of day.
Sure.
You'd have to be stuck under a weight before they'd actually come over
Right.
and give you a hand. And that's not the case here. Here I walk through the door and it's like, hey, how you doing? And
Right.
what's going on? And what are you doing today? And, is Sawyer going to be here with you? And if not, they all give you a watchful eye or they'll come over and spot you. And yeah, I mean, if you want to be competitive at something, as far as I know, here in the Houston metro area, this is the best bet.
Thanks. I got a question for you for people that are considered to be over the hill. I mean, I don't even know what your hill is at this point. Maybe you're just barely scratching the middle of your life. But for those of the listeners and people that are over the hill at this point that are like, oh, I'm too old to start. I've checked out. It's really not useful at this point. It's all vanity and like marginal health benefits. What would you say to them?
I would say, to be frank, get off your ass.
Okay.
And find yourself a trainer. Not everybody, somehow I feel like I was blessed and gifted to be able to compete at the level that I'm competing right now. Even after overcoming all this other stuff. But I'm living proof that it's overcomable. There were times when I with chemotherapy and everything else, I couldn't even get out of bed. I never thought that I would ever be back to anything close to what I used to be. And now I'm beyond some of the wildest thoughts that I ever had. I believe that the mind is the strongest muscle that we have in our body. That if the mind is telling you you can't, you won't. You need to make the mind tell you I can. Now that doesn't mean everybody's going to become a competitive power lifter or win a high rocks event. But I'll tell you what.
Or even power lift.
You'll improve, or power lift. You will improve your life tremendously. And once you get some strength, what I found is, there's all this theory going around about, after 30 years old, you lose 1% of your muscle mass every year. I look at me, and even though I've lost weight and I'm a little way shorter than I used to be, gone through some of that aging process, like when I got through with my heart surgery, I weighed 124, 125 pounds. I've put back on 12 pounds of muscle, all lean mass, the stuff that they said you can't, because we did, and it's not only just the workout and the motivational part that I owe you thanks for, but it's also the dietary thing. It's like, come on, Flaum, how much protein have you had?
Yeah.
You can't build muscle if you don't eat. You got to eat. And, overall, that's it. You can't, people will allow themselves to say that I'm too old. And that's a really rocky road to go down, because from what I've studied and what I've heard, the secret to longevity is muscle mass. Once you let all that muscle mass go away, that doesn't mean that you necessarily lose weight. It just converts. to adipoise tissue that doesn't do anything. And what happens is you get into your 70s and you fall in the bathroom, and there's a couple of things behind it. You haven't done any weightlifting, so there's been no stress on your skeletal system, so the bones are weaker.
How does lifting counteract that?
Well, you're stressing the bones,
Mm-hmm.
and then while you're doing that, you're also building muscle mass, so you don't fall to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
because you have supportive tissue.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do fall, you don't break anything.
Because muscle acts as a cushion and protection for
Absolutely.
the structure. Yes.
Absolutely. But also the bones are stronger.
They build bone density. Yeah.
Yeah.
From strength training.
So, doctors used to tell me, take it easy, you got to let your body recover, you got to do this and that. And they've yelled at me over the years because I don't. And now they're on my side. They're saying, we should have known this years ago.
Sure.
That if people stay in good physical condition, they live much longer. And the other thing, when you're physically active like that, you don't lose your intelligence, your brain, your blood flows going. It's all part of life. You remain a part of life. Look at me, I'm 80 years old, and I'm looking forward to going to a national competition. Instead of sitting on my butt and watching Netflix.
Sure.
And watching Rocky go to a competition.
Sure.
I'm in it. I'm
get
in
to live
life. The thing that I found over 80 years is that all you have to do is open the door and walk out in the street, and you're in the middle of life. And the problem with people is they get older and they become less secure in their physical being. They begin to retract from it, and they think life is passing them by, but really they're backing out of life. And if you have kids that are grown up, if you have grandchildren on the way, if you want to see all of that and be in a happy place, you got to do something for yourself. And you can spend money on fancy cars and on big vacations, but what do you have to show for it afterwards? You're still old and feeble.
So that's another concept that I've kind of dealt with when talking to people, is that one big part of setting up this routine for physical fitness is finding the magic in the mundane, right?
Yeah.
So being able to at least not completely despairingly or fully begrudgingly get out of bed, eat, and go to the gym. It doesn't mean that you can't go on lavish vacations or take a couple of weeks off in the year to do all this stuff and work toward that, but not hating your daily routine and making it into something that's enjoyable is going to help you to enjoy doing these little micro habits, these behaviors.
Well, also it's part of your lifestyle. You go on a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I go on vacations, but I find a place to work out.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get the same kind of workout I get when I'm, motivated and moving forward for a goal.
Right.
But I don't lose anything.
Yeah.
And
especially if it's a week, it's not going to make much
it
of a
makes
difference.
me feel better. And yeah, a week doesn't make any difference. In fact, coming into an event for 3 or 4 days to a week before, everything's in a decline. You don't want to be overstressing everything, so you're cutting down on the amount of weight you're lifting and everything else, and all the volume, so that you can peak on the day that you actually go and compete.
Taper. Yep. Exactly.
So, that tapering can help. So if you go on vacation and you, like I went up, my youngest son had a baby boy, so I went up and visited my grandson for my brand new grandson and my son for my 80th birthday, and I spent 5 days without working out. But I came back, and you made me feel really bad on the first day. So the second day was a little hard.
Yeah.
But after that, everything leveled out.
That's your punishment for spending time with your family.
Yeah.
You got to spend it with me.
That's right.
Yep. Okay, yeah. What do you think that you would have corrected health and longevity-wise throughout your life? Or what advice would you give to people that you would have prioritized more as you came into your 80s? I'm sure the health scare of the 35 years of mantle cell lymphoma might have straightened you out
Well,
in a lot of ways.
You know, it's, I've always, like I said, you know, through the whole storyline, I've always reverted back to the physical side of things.
Sure.
So I've always looked forward to that, and have found ways to get back into it. I mean, I remember coming off of the cancer or coming off of the heart stuff and walking back into the gym and grabbing a 45-pound plate and going to put it up on a machine and go, oh my God, that's so heavy. Mm-hmm. Because you lose so much so quickly. But then you fight your way back through it. And to me, the fight's enjoyable.
Sure.
But you know, that doesn't mean that you have to lift 100 pounds. You know, maybe moving 5-pound dumbbells around as a starter will get you there. But you need somebody to take you down that path. You know, just throwing stuff around or reading books on it. You know, if you don't have somebody knowledgeable, you just never, I mean, your goal, even if your goal isn't being the guy that lifts the most weight, if it's just being in good shape to conduct life and, you know, go out and do your garden and, you know, be able to take care of your family and so forth without them taking care of you, you need somebody to guide you a little bit. So get off your horse and come to Sigma.
Great plug once again. That's like number 10. I think I had one more question written down for you. Let me just.
Is this thing still running?
I hope so. This is gold. Let's see. Is it? Yep. We're at hour 12. That's good. Good content right there. You know what? Let's go to commercial break.
Okay.
I got a script written out for this. This episode of Gen Pop TV is brought to you by me. Is that a good one?
That's true.
Yeah. If you're looking to start your fitness journey or bring yourself from beginner to intermediate territory, or even from intermediate to advanced territory, I have programs to get you the results you're looking for. I have both in-person and online slots available. Just shoot me a DM through my Instagram, genpop.athlete, to get started. Yeah, cool. So, what are we missing here? So, it is, you know, tough to say where we'll go from here. I think once we hit your powerlifting goals, depending on what the ceiling is, probably 400. I think power training would be nice too. So we're looking forward to that, getting you back into tennis and racket sports and all that. I remember Chris Wilson, he told me one of the first stories that he told me about you, of which I've heard many, given that you're the face with that. Not from him, but from other people. He said that you had like a bunch of bandages stuck to you for some reason. It was probably some surgery. They said that you were playing tennis tennis on the court, and I think you took a wrong turn and the bandage just ripped open and you were bleeding all over the court. And it caused the guy to faint.
Well, it wasn't quite that bad.
It wasn't that bad?
It was actually funnier than that. What happened was I noticed blood was running down my leg where something had ripped open, you know, from the wound. So I covered it back up, but then I had the blood on the leg and I had a tennis ball in my hand. We were were playing, and I
Yeah.
just wiped the blood onto the tennis ball. And then I served it, and the guy on the other end completely freaked out. He
Yeah.
went, "Oh my God, you bled on the tennis ball," you know, and he was thinking AIDS,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I said, "I got so much chemotherapy, nothing else is living. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about that."
Yeah.
But he freaked out, threw the tennis balls away, got a new can of balls, and said, "Don't you dare get blood." You know? So, yeah. And Chris was hysterical. He wasn't on the court. He was sitting off, you know, waiting. And so he
he'll laugh at
witnessed the whole
anything.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
He's got a good sense of humor. Okay. Well, any parting words for the listeners?
Yeah, I can give him another pitch.
Another pitch?
Sawyer and Sigma.
Yep.
SS.
SS. All right. Thank you very much. This has been Gen Pop TV.
Gen Pop.